to Psalm 23, and I know a few weeks ago we looked at Psalm 23, and we looked at it in connection with Jesus as a shepherd. We are looking at overseers in the Lord's church, and the language that is used consistently throughout the New Testament with reference to these men are that they also are shepherds, and in fact looked last week at 1 Peter 5. And it begins, I exhort the elders among you as a fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ, as well as a partaker of the glory that's going to be revealed, shepherd the flock of God. It also points out down in verse 4 that when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. We talked about that a little bit, but I want to use that to help us understand why it is that Psalm 23, even though I believe that primarily it's about the Lord functioning as our shepherd, why it has application and why we can have a secondary discussion about overseers in connection with this psalm, because they are shepherds functioning under the chief shepherd, supposed to be following him, supposed to be doing the same things that he done, supposed to be teaching the same things that he taught, supposed to be executing his will, not their own. And so if they are doing that, then they are going to be leading and shepherding the flock in the same fashion that he did, looking to the same outcomes that he was looking for, seeking to accomplish the same goals that he was seeking to accomplish, based upon the authority that's given them. Now, when it opens up, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. I'm going to stop there for a moment. What do we know about shepherds? How do shepherds interact with their sheep? You ever thought about that? Where does a shepherd find the sheep? Okay. And by the way, I agree that both of those fall underneath the same kind of leadership structure. Okay, go ahead. Right. When the shepherd cares for the sheep, does the shepherd sit on his throne and expect the sheep to come to him, or does the shepherd get up and leave the comfort of his home and go out to the sheep? He goes to the sheep. Now let's carry this out and think about this for just a moment. We know that Psalm 23 has its primary application in the function of Jesus as a shepherd. And as the chief shepherd, what did he do? Well, he left heaven and he came to the earth to live among men. Shall call his name Emmanuel, which being translated means, anybody remember what the translation of Emmanuel is? God with us. He left heaven, left the glories of heaven, came to the earth and lived among men. Not only did he come to the earth and live among men, what did he actually do? What did he go to the length of doing? He actually lived as a man on the earth among those that he would shepherd and care for. And so he carried in his behavior this pattern, that the shepherd goes to the sheep. I believe that elders have to do the same. That elders have to walk alongside people. That elders have to go to where people are and meet them on their terms and in their place and engage them rather than expect them to come to them. Oh, without a doubt. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there. But it starts with, in Jesus came to the earth, and then he said that my sheep hear my voice, and they follow me. Elders have to do the same thing. They have to go to the people. They have to walk as a fellow sojourner. Remember, Jesus came and he walked on this earth what? As a man. They have to walk among the people as a fellow sojourner. It is not an us and them situation. Or what happens even more often and is much worse even than that, an us versus them situation. That is not what we're talking about. It's simply an us situation. It is the shepherds going out with the flock, walking with them as a fellow sojourner, helping those people succeed, helping them get to the place that they need to be. The language throughout the New Testament, Jesus talks about they were scattered like sheep without a shepherd. That's what happens to sheep that don't have a shepherd among them. They don't end up going anywhere productive or good. They don't find pasture. They don't find water. They don't have protection. The shepherd goes out to them and provides them the path to these things and helps lead them to success. Elders have to do that. It's always about the sheep. Always about the sheep. And we're all sheep. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting. The chief shepherd is here. What about those that are appointed shepherd in local churches? What are they? They're fellow sojourners. We would use language. Do you know what a bellwether is? Anybody know what that term means? You hear it every 4 years in the news about places like Iowa, places like Ohio. They talk about them being bellwether states pertaining to presidential elections. And what that means is that they are trendsetters. If you look to what happens there, you can get a good feel about what's going to happen everywhere. Well, what a bellwether actually is a sheep that leads the other sheep by wearing a bell around his neck. And so as it walks and goes, guess what the other ones do? They follow. Now, how does it get the bell on its neck? I said, how does it get the bell on its neck? Is it born that way? The shepherd puts it on. So the chief shepherd puts a bell on this sheep that has exemplified the kind of behavior that he's looking for in his sheep, that goes to the right places, that eats the right places, that drinks from the right places, that follows him. He identifies who that is, puts a bell on it, and then the rest of the sheep do what? They follow. That's kind of what overseers in local churches are. Men who have demonstrated that they have the qualities of those who follow the chief shepherd. Right. So we've got these, and we'll probably not look at it anytime real soon, but at some point, I'm sure we will. We've got certain qualifications that are given that we ought to be looking for. Characteristics is a better way to think of it, of men that we identify as being the bellwethers, the ones that we need to look at and to follow. And we know that they're following the Master. And so, through the instruction of the Word of God, they're identified as being the bellwethers. And the rest then follow. That's kind of how I understand this role of overseeing. It's not a role that puts you in a different class, that makes you anything different than you are. You're still just among the flock of God. You're still just another sheep. But because you have demonstrated that you have followed the chief shepherd, he has placed a bell on you and says, hey guys, you might want to follow him. He's going to the right places. He's doing the right things. He has the right characteristics. He is exemplifying what I'm looking for. And so we look to them, and that's how I understand this role. We need to be careful and not misunderstand language like from Hebrews 13:17, where it says that we are to submit to those. People read that language and they think that that means that there's some kind of hierarchical structure. That's a hard word to say. In the church, I don't really think that that's what's being presented. In fact, there's a couple other things before we get into Psalm 23 I want to look at in connection with that. Look with me real quickly at Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 21. And I think I mentioned it. It's from Hebrews 13:17 that it tells us to obey them who are your leaders and submit to them. And a lot of people, I think, misunderstand what that's saying, because in Ephesians 5:21, it tells generally the entire church to do what? Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. That's all of us. And what is that talking about, or what does it mean? Well, flip over to Philippians, the very next book in your New Testament, chapter 2 and verse 3, where it's described like this: do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. And so this idea of obeying and submitting is not power-based. It is voluntary. Isn't that what Peter said? Not as lording it over the flock, but that it should be willfully that people follow. You ever seen, we used to call them hobos. That's probably politically incorrect nowadays. I don't know. What do you call these guys that just wander the highways and byways of the country now? Is it okay? Does everybody know what I'm talking about when I say a hobo? Yeah, and some of them are, and some of them actually do have homes. There's actually a CEO of some big corporation that spends 6 months a year living that way by choice. But go ahead. Okay. You ever see any of those guys that have dogs with them? Do you ever see the dogs running away from them? Are they on leashes? So why is the dog always there with them? It chooses to follow them. That's the mindset. You shouldn't have to try to force, to use power to make this happen. It ought to be like the bellwether sheep, where when it goes to walking, what does the rest of the flock do? They just follow because they want to. Because they know that if they follow that one, where they're going to end up. where the shepherd's leading. They know they're going to end up in a good place. That's the way this ought to be. That's the kind of leadership that is good leadership. You don't have to beat people who want to follow you. You don't have to yell and you don't have to scream. They want to be there. They want to listen. You go back and read the story of Nehemiah and look at how those people willingly worked with him. And that is the way it was viewed, as them working together. Not as someone up here in charge of everyone and everybody else just doing all the work, but as fellow workers, arm in arm, side by side, working together, and nobody rebelling, but everyone listening and doing their part. That is essentially what's going on here. We've got the chief shepherd, Christ himself, who is leading us. And we've got these experienced, knowledgeable, godly people who are following him, leaving us a path. And by the way, Paul kind of intimated this with reference to his apostleship, where he said, you imitate me as I imitate Christ. That's the kind of idea. If I'm wanting to follow the shepherd, then I want to follow these godly people. And if it's not working that way, there's a problem. There's a problem somewhere, because shepherds provide needs. I shall not want. And want doesn't mean it's misused today. I'm going to say it that way. When someone says, ooh, I want that, today, what do we think that means? It's not necessary. They just desire it. That's not what want means as it's used here. I shall not want. What does that mean? Yeah, I shall not lack anything. A want, in its purer form, is something that's necessary that I don't have. And the shepherd makes sure that we don't have any of those things. If I understand that local overseers, men that we recognize are godly men who are seeking our own interests, who are sojourning with us, helping us succeed, if we know that they're helping make certain that we have everything we need to succeed, what are we going to naturally want to do? We're going to want to give proper deference to the things that they say, because we know that they have our own interest at heart. We know that they're leading by what's the golden rule? Do unto others as you would have that they would do to you. And remember, we talked about that. That means not, oh, I like this, so I'm going to do this to that person. That means if I was in that person's shoes, this is how I would want this to go down. So that's what I'm going to do. If I was the one being talked to about this, this is how I would want them to speak to me. This is the respect that I would want them to show me. This is the tone and the tenor that I would want them to take. And I would want them to be understanding. Okay, if I know that, then if I find myself in that situation, I need to be understanding, and I need to take the right tone, and I need to engage in the right way. And by the way, it's a lifelong process to develop the skill to do that. I'm not always there. You can talk to my wife about that after services. I don't hear it as much as I used to, but I used to hear it all the time. It's not what you said, it's the way you said it. The tone matters. And when someone's talking to you, you understand that. sometimes when you're doing the talking, you don't really think about that. There's lots of things that matter. If someone is truly seeking to fulfill my needs, it's not a problem. That's what overseers would do. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. The things that I need, food, water, spiritual well-being, these things are provided. Now, you make the spiritual application of that food and water. We know that Christ is what? The living water. We know He's also the bread that came down out of heaven. And so a good shepherd is leading people where? When He brings them to green pastures, where's He bringing them? To the bread of life. When He leads them beside still water, where's He leading them to? To the water of life. Again, you remember that exchange between Jesus and the Samaritan woman. If you knew who it was that was asking you for water, you would have asked him, or me, in the context. Jesus said to her. And then, of course, she went, well, yeah, but you don't even have a bucket. How are you going to get me any water out of the well? Because she didn't understand what He was talking about. So we need to think about those kinds of things. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. If Christ is leading people in the paths of righteousness, then those under-shepherds, those Bellwether Christians, ought to be doing what? Leading to the paths of righteousness. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. The chief shepherd is supposed to be someone who protects. The chief shepherd is supposed to be someone who makes us comfortable even in the midst of the most uncomfortable of circumstances. It doesn't make the discomfort of the circumstance go away, but it makes it more bearable, right? I guess the best way to explain this that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm pretty sure that I can say that this will be true almost with everybody. If you don't feel good, if you're actually really, really sick, where do you want to be? Home. Why do you want to be home? You're not going to feel any better at home than you are anywhere else, so why do you want to be home? Because you're comfortable there. And though your illness is still there and you're still in misery possibly, you're still as comfortable in that misery as you could possibly be because you're in the only place that can provide you any relief at all. By the way, if it gets acute enough, if you think you're about to die and that there's something that can be done about it, where do you want to be? You want to be at the hospital. And then when you think that that's over with and you're just uncomfortable again, where do you want to be? Home. Christ provides that for us. Even in the most difficult times, He is there with us. He is walking with us. His strength, His comfort, His guidance, His care, His love, all of that. By the way, the very best place to be if you're sick is really at home, which means your mama's there taking care of you. Or, in this case, the shepherd's there. Now, the under-shepherds, what's their job? To create that same environment. Where despite the fact that there are difficulties in life and people are under the shadow of death and people are surrounded by evil, I don't have to be afraid of evil because I know that there are people who are standing right beside me who have my back, who are looking out for my best interest, and who are equipped to protect me. I don't have to fear the evil of false teaching, because I know that there are men who are going to stop the mouths of those who are teaching things that are not true. And I know that those men know the book because they've exemplified their knowledge in their lives already. People who have the wisdom to navigate through difficult waters, because it's already been demonstrated and it's been seen, and so they've become bellwethers, and so I watch how they live, and just having them nearby, knowing that they're there in case I step out of line to nudge me back on track. There's comfort. That's what overseers ought to be concerned with. Is creating an environment where people who are searching for Christ and seeking to follow Christ can do so in comfort and safety, in a protected environment where they feel safe and at home. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Listen, if we are properly taught, if we are properly led, if we are properly protected, if our faith is developed, then we develop the kind of confidence that Paul had. What did Paul know was in store for him at the end of his life? Now, as he was facing the possibility of death, what did he say? In the future, there is laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the righteous judge will award on that day. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemy. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days. This is the expression of one who knows the blessings that they have, who is confident that they have gone to the green pastures, that they have gone to the still waters, that their soul has been restored, who are confident and don't fear death and don't fear God's judgment because they've been cared for and led by those who are qualified and able to preserve them. And that's the only thing that those men are concerned about, is keeping watch over the souls of the people in their charge. Yes, sir. Yeah, without a doubt, it can certainly help you have the right mindset. It ought to help them have the right mindset as well. Knowing that I'm going to give an account, knowing that I have the responsibility to watch over the souls of those in my charge, knowing that if a sheep is lost, whose fault is it? Now, it doesn't make me responsible for their sin. It makes me responsible for what? For not going and finding them. For not picking them up and carrying them back on my shoulders. For not keeping watch for them in the first place, possibly. There's lots of levels in there that it can be on me. doesn't do anything about their guilt. They're going to answer for their own guilt. But I need to understand that I'm going to answer for whether or not I did my job, whether or not I led them properly, whether or not I functioned and created this environment that we're reading about where they feel safe and secure, where they come to me with their problems because they trust me. And they don't fear that they're going to be judged. They know that they're going to be helped. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. That is the kind of thing that a parent ought to bring to children. That is the kind of thing that an overseer ought to bring to a church. That is the kind of thing that a boss should bring to a department that he heads, where his employees know that if they go to him or her, that he is going to protect them, that he is going to help them, that he is going to bring them through the trouble and show them the right path forward. The breakdown in trust ends marriages. The breakdown in trust destroys the parental-child relationship. The breakdown in trust destroys local churches, and all that hinges on communication, by the way, but that's another story for another day and another lesson. But this is what it has to be about. It always has to be about the sheep. It always has to be about protecting the flock. It always has to be about going after the one who's gone, leaving the 99 and going after the one. It always has to be about making as many of the people successful in their walk of faith as is possible. Now, does that mean that you're always going to understand what the shepherd's doing? No. Just because I don't understand what they're doing, does that mean that they don't have my best interest at heart? No. There's a lot of things that my parents did that I didn't understand, that I look back on now, and I may not approach it exactly the same way they did, but I look back on what they did now, and I go, oh, you know what? I know what they were doing. They were trying to help me. And I was fighting against it. And we have to be careful. We have to create that environment that a shepherd creates, so that the flock wants to be with the shepherd. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if a shepherd had to chase down every sheep to keep it close at hand, he would starve to death. Yes, sir. Yep. All of those roles had the same purpose: to equip the saints, to protect the sheep. That's another way of saying the same thing. To perfect faith. And good shepherds notice when their sheep are lame. They notice when their sheep are injured. And they go and provide care. You have to be mindful, and your eyes have to be open, and you have to be watching, and people have to know you. And again, this goes back to modeling this after Christ. My sheep hear my voice, and they know me, and I follow them. And then he turns around and says, what? And I know them and call them by name. So the model of this shepherd relationship is two ways, where the sheep know the shepherd and follow his voice, and the shepherd know the sheep and call them by name. By the way, the literal name aspect of it doesn't really matter that much. I'm terrible with names, so I'm going to cut people slack about that. Call them by name just means what? That there's a relationship there. An awareness and intimate knowledge. An astronomer can call the stars by name. I can't. I can say, yeah, there's one there, and there's one there, and there's one there. I don't know any of them are called. Actually, a few of them I do, but very few of them. Engaged shepherds, they know their people. I got to stop. Anybody have any questions or comments before we do? All right, notice on the screen behind me, Ezekiel 34. That's where we're going to be next time, if the Lord wills. And Isaiah 56 after that. So you can look at those passages and see, and we're going to see what they have to do to teach and instruct along these ways. And again, I want to point this out. This applies to you at every level of your life, as parents, as husband and wife, as children toward your parents, as employers, as employees. Understanding this and looking for this and developing this kind of relationship is absolutely vital.